colleague, Mr. Mohammed Shbaro, and he's a journalist. Thank you for your time. Let me, first of all, begin with Ambassador Gina. Ambassador Gina, what we know so far about this MOU draft, how do you think it could have achieved all the demands of President Trump that he announced earlier?
Thank you so much for having me. In fact, we know that this agreement, and we don't have pure details about it, but from what has been reported, leaks from American Iranian officials are concerned, it is a memorandum of understanding that basically sets up a framework, most importantly, to get the Strait of Hormuz reopened. That is, the Iranians lifting their uh, blockade and the Americans lifting our blockade. That is an urgent issue for the world economy, for President Trump, with elections coming up as well, and certainly for the Iranians, whose economy has been devastated by the war and subsequent activities of the Iranian government. That said, it does not deal with specifically the nuclear file, which is one of the issues that President Trump said must be resolved by the war. The memorandum is to set up the structure for negotiations of whether the highly enriched uranium stays in Iran, leaves Iran, its inspections. Is it diluted? Does it get carted away? Do the Iranians foreclose on further enrichment for X number of years? All of those things are to be discussed. Therefore, President Trump is getting a great deal of pushback, of criticism that we've had a war, devastating loss of life in the region, damage to the world's economies, particularly our allies in the region, just to get back to negotiations over the nuclear file. So it does not cover all of the issues that President Trump said that it should.
Yes. Mr. Shbaro, our colleague from London. So this framework agreement, do you think can really guarantee successful negotiations for 60 days? If this framework agreement can really help Iran in getting their frozen assets partial lifting of sanctions and many other things, maybe also cessation of hostilities across all fronts for the reopening of Strait of Hormuz. Does this guarantee negotiation for 60 days? Good evening, Lara, and my greetings to Ambassador Gina Winstanley. So we hope that this memorandum of understanding will pave the road for many other topics. But this is an agreement in principle, just according to the reports and the leaked statements we have been getting, and also what you have broadcast also about the details of this deal. But I don't think that this MOU will touch on all other sticking issues, and everything seems to be at the back burner. And by the hour, we get to know that even the MOU is facing many roadblocks. The most important roadblock is the confidence and trust. We know that there is a complete lack of trust between the Iranians and the Americans. And also, there is one more sensitive matter. President Trump must emerge victorious out of this MOU or even the postponed negotiations. And Iran is also having some leverage and believe that in spite of being beaten badly, infrastructure, military, naval assets, everything, Iran is not persuaded that it has been defeated. They believe they are also victorious. Holding the Strait of Hormuz, suffocating the global economy, Iran believes is the biggest victory so far, and it has not abandoned that leverage. And that's why we can see Iran is just dictating how the drafting of the of the MOU or the statements that will be released, where it doesn't show that Iran has given major concessions or promised to give some concessions in the 30 or 60 days. Lara, if we go back to the time of the announcement of the ceasefire, Iran was supposed to open the Strait of Hormuz, but it didn't do so. Ambassador Gina Winstanley now postponing those important sticking issues for the next 30, 60 days. To what extent that can reflect the possibility of reaching a deal? The main topics, the enrichment, the nuclear program, proxies, and ballistic missile drones, all are postponed. And therefore, why until now we have not reached to some kind of understanding about those issues?
Thank you. Well, there is indeed the possibility of reaching a deal. 60 days makes more sense than 30 for that, but there has been some groundwork laid. Certainly, if, as the president has said, that the negotiations are going to be more professionalized. So I assume that means they will be tapping into the officials, the diplomats, the professionals who participated in the JCPOA negotiations under President Obama, or at least have the record of what went before, that will allow President Trump to build on that, to strengthen that agreement. His objection has been that the Obama agreement did not go far enough. So, by tapping into what went before, he may indeed be able to get a stronger, certainly a longer agreement with Iran. So, that may be the reason to have at least those 30 to 60 days. It does take time. These are complex issues, not to be decided in a few days with your best friend and your son in law doing the negotiating. It does need professionalism, and the president has said that we are now going to do that. Nonetheless, as we discussed, the pushback, the criticism that this initial agreement, this initial memorandum of understanding does not even touch on the nuclear issue. And this puts President Trump in a somewhat vulnerable position from his critics, both hardliners and from the Democratic side. The hardliners saying he's not being tough enough on Iran, the Democrats saying, and others, not just Democrats, that he brought us into a war needlessly since we are already in negotiations with Iran.
Mr. Shbaro, Mohammed from London, do you think now, with all what we have been following in terms of those rounds of negotiations with Iran since 2015 until now, do you think that it is fair to say that Iran is negotiating with different intentions? Maybe Iran is more willing today to give more concession or to deal with President Trump in a different way than it did with President Obama. And minding you that Obama's president is was more responsible. I'm afraid to say no. Iran is not willing to negotiate in any way to show good intention where it can really give up its nuclear program unless it is forced to do so. It will never give any guarantees about the ballistic missile unless it is forced to. It will not give up its proxies in the region. And we have been hearing those statements tonight, what's happening in Lebanon, and also the communications with the Iranian officials. All this does not indicate that the Iranian regime now is more ready and more willing at least to collaborate or to show some sense of cooperation. But what we understand is that the Iranian regime has absorbed the attacks, and now they seem to be in their comfort zone to negotiate in a way that would serve their interest. The Iranian regime was under existential threat so that they can remove their ideology and the foundations that Iran relied upon since the year 1979. But today, if you read in between the lines, the Iranian regime is asking to have sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Imagine if this happens, even in an implied agreement, then Iran has achieved what it has been calling for the last 50 years, so that the Americans should leave the Gulf and Iran will be in charge of security and managing the Strait of Hormuz. And I repeat again, so apparently the Iranians are not willing, or now more willing, to play just as a normal state that would just collaborate and comply with the international law, subject to the basic and fundamental diplomacy frameworks about security, freedom of navigation, stability, non-interference with the affairs of other neighbors. This is very important, what you mentioned, Muhammad Shbaro, about the sovereignty and also the U.S. presence in the region, because that was part of the MOU draft. Let me ask Ambassador Gina. Ambassador Gina, it looks like that there has been an agreement to discuss the U.S. presence in the region and not final approval to just for them to leave. But I'm surprised that the United States has agreed to discuss this matter, even though they will not give concessions. To what extent this could be really serious in terms of the reactions that we could hear from this likelihood if Trump really goes ahead with that?
I believe the possibility of that is zero. The United States will stand by its allies in the region. The presence of U.S. Military at bases in the region is still desired. We work very closely with our allies. Our expectation is that will continue. So, whatever the Iranians may think is being discussed, it certainly would not be a retreat by the United States from the region. That is highly unlikely. The challenge, of course, for our allies in the region is that we have seen from the war since February that they are the ones that take the hits from Iran. Iran cannot go military to military against the United States, let alone the United States and Israel. But it can do considerable damage to the infrastructure, to the assets of our allies in the region, and they cannot move. That is the reality. And while the United States did do considerable damage, as Mohammed said, to the Navy, to infrastructure, to their military capabilities, it did not eliminate them, and they have significant abilities left. As we have seen with their fast boats, with their drones, etc., and they maintain that capability and therefore can continue to do harm. That means President Trump has near universal support for finding an off ramp, doing the deal that is necessary, recognizing that it could leave Iran in a position that may be slightly stronger in some aspects than it was before the war started. And that is with regard to control over the Strait of Hormuz. The allies in the region are taking steps to make the straits less relevant to the passage of goods, commodity, and oil by developing other pathways. It will take time, but they are certainly focused on that to lessen the import of Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is really a controversial issue, Mr. Mohammed Shbaro. I mean, if it is really agreed just between the United States and Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Now, we know that many countries are struggling, like Europe, Asia. Do you think that if it is reopened, do you think that this would alleviate the pressure on President Trump, and this can take us to a deeper talks between Iran and the United States, and without just having to worry about the global economy? The dilemma remains in that Iran is still holding its firm grip on the Strait of Hormuz and the highly enriched uranium. This could be the main leverage of Iran to get further concessions from the United States. Yes, the Strait of Hormuz arguably could be, according to this MOU, the MOU draft, that the Strait of Hormuz might be reopened. But the question, do you think it will be subject now to the management of Iran, or Iran maybe is finding some excuse not to reopen it, maybe for the removal of mines or something like that? Maybe it can find also some other feeble excuses, such as the difficulty of removing those mines, given their naval assets have been destroyed, while other vessels and tankers are still passing through with the permission of Iran. Those are the vessels that belong to countries that are friendly to Iran. Will Iran allow the vessels and tankers of all countries to go through? We don't know. All these questions are still matters of confidence building, but those could be one of the important topics that should be taken into account in this MOU. There are also some loopholes that would make the implementation of this MOU very difficult. And here we believe that the visit of the Pakistani mediator to China, maybe to get some guarantees that China will put some pressure on Iran, maybe from some back channels, at least to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and as where other topics, the nuclear program, drones, etc., could be delayed until later. Thank you so much from London, Mohammed Smaro, and also Ambassador Gina Winstanley, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
شكرا سعادة السفيرة.